Are the Huskers speaking it into existence? And what is it? We'll talk about it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Head to FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, welcome in. It is Monday of week 6 in the college football world. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Back in Nebraska, Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. Week 5 is behind us. Nebraska dispatched Purdue with a strong second half in West Lafayette on Saturday afternoon, 28-10 at Ross-Ade Stadium. Can you believe it? We're at the halfway point of the season after this week when Rutgers comes to Memorial Stadium for a 3 p.m. kick on, is it FS1? I believe it's FS1.
Yeah, hard to believe. Actually, thank you for saying that for the first time. Should I have more opinions than I do right now? But should we know more about this team than we do, or do we know everything? I don't know. It's a deep question to start off a Monday podcast.
Here's what we know. The Nebraska football coaches and players want someone to believe that they're a good team. And what I'm getting at is, here's a quote from John Bullock, the Nebraska linebacker who had a pick 6 in the fourth quarter of the victory against Purdue, playing at a high level. John Bullock, I would say, one of the top Nebraska defensive players this year. He said after the game, and wasn't really asked this, but he was talking about the defense. He said, "We're still a good team. We are. We've just got to play like it. I think we played like it today. Big step up from last week." This is Matt Rhule on the previous Monday. So 1 week ago today, he said, "It's not like we're not good. That's my message to our guys." Later, Rhule said, quote, "We have a good team. They just have to play well. That sounds so simple, yet that's kind of where we are." Who are they trying to get to believe they have a good team? Are they talking to themselves? Rhule often does that in the press conference setting, talks to the players. He knows that they get wind of what is said publicly. Are they talking to the fans? Do they feel that the fans are not giving this team their due? Are they talking to us in the media? Why would they do that? I mean, they are talking to us, but why do they care what we think? I'm curious that why this has come up now multiple times, where Nebraska players and coaches, you're talking about like a captain-like figure, single-digit guy, John Bullock, leader of the defense, middle linebacker. We're a good team. Rhule, we're a good team. Okay, yeah. That's fine. Who doesn't believe they're a good team? What's going on here in the psychology of this?
Okay, so here's my thought. I think they're talking to themselves. And I don't think this is new. Like, this is something, and now it's just the difference is, I think, whether you actually believe it or not, or whether it's true or not, right? And that kind of decides itself on the field. Matt Rhule, when he first got here, the group that he inherited, he wrapped his arms around those guys right away and said, we can win with these guys. And maybe he thought that was true. He probably did. But then they got into the season in 2023 and they weren't winning very much. And it's still over and over was, we just got to execute some things. We just have to do things the right way. We just have to play well. And that's kind of what you heard. Now, halfway through, as you mentioned, the 2024 season, they're undoubtedly a better team. They are better at football than they were a year ago. But the same thing kind of keeps coming up, and it's like, hey, we just have to kind of remind ourselves of this, that we are a good team. We have to, just let our we don't have to do anything extra. We just have to kind of be ourselves. So I think there's different levels of like how it actually, manifests itself on the field. But it's been I think it's been a pretty consistent through line since Rhule's been here. Is like, let's just infuse confidence. Remember the whole thing with the offensive line last year before the season?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
He was just like constantly, daily, like, those guys are good.
They're so good.
Yeah, those guys are so good. that probably wasn't true. He probably knew it wasn't true. So I think that is like a coaching that's definitely a thing that he decides to go to every once in a while.
So I think when Nebraska takes a signal that Nebraska has taken another step, and they're taking steps now. We're not disparaging the steps that Nebraska's taken. There's some of that out on Husker Twitter right now, and I'm against it. I'm not in favor of minimizing what Nebraska has done in starting 4-1, in really having one loss that could have gone either way. It was a loss. Okay, let's not say that. It didn't go Nebraska's way. They're not almost 5-0. They're 4-1. Fine. Yeah. First Big Ten road win by an 18-point margin or more in 5 years. Yeah, it was Purdue. But big win against Colorado, who, if you haven't noticed, hasn't lost since it came to Nebraska. Like, yeah, it's a good team. Like, it doesn't need to be beat over our heads. What I think that when the signal that Nebraska has taken another step will be when no one is saying that, when they don't need to say it, when the players who are on the field, they know it.
Yeah.
Nobody has to tell them. And those players are coming. Actually, they're already here. So this brings me to a video that I saw you shared on Sunday on Twitter.
Yeah.
Of Jacory Barney scoring a touchdown, had a little taunt for the Purdue defense as he raced past them to the end zone, the true freshman. And then there's Dylan Raiola with the dance in the end zone, and what appeared to be a response as he went to the sidelines to the Purdue students who were chanting, "You're not Patrick," at Raiola earlier in the game. Was that the Mahomes hand gesture that he did to them, or was that just like quit talking, a Tweety bird? What was your read on that?
Oh, no, I don't think he was asking for another play, considering they just scored a touchdown. No, I think that was it's a great point
talking, that kind of thing.
It is a great video by Clayton Collier, who's with WWT in Omaha, and I saw that last night. I'm like, wow. I mean, first of all, we just don't see that from Dylan. You know, nope. I saw
first road game.
I saw Jacory Barney do the cheetah peace sign on his way to the end zone, and I was just like, you know, wow, he didn't get flagged. You know, that was kind of amazing. And yes, he's supremely confident, as he should.
Everything else got flagged. They didn't flag taunting though.
I know that was whatever. I don't know what the rules are on what can happen before you walk into the end zone anymore. Just don't drop the football, I guess. So yeah, those are two pretty good examples of guys. And like, I think what we're talking
nobody's got to tell those guys they're good. They
exactly. Know. We're talking about in the really granular nature of this conversation is the comparison piece, right? When Nebraska played against Colorado, they thought and knew going into that game that they were better than them because of what happened last year. I don't know what they thought going into Illinois. Like in the mindset piece is something that we've obviously talked about a ton following that game. And they probably thought that going into Purdue, but like once you stop thinking and comparing yourselves to other, like that's what Rhule is trying to get to. We don't have to compare ourselves to these other people, and that let other people take care of it, and we'll see where it ends up at the end of the day. Like I think that ultimately is what he's trying to do. Some of that is just human nature, and you can't get rid of it, you know. But it's definitely been ingrained in the Nebraska football program for a long time.
It's a slippery slope, I think, the comparative thinking that you're talking about, because then you're always trying to get up for some reason. You're always trying to find some motivation with what your opponent is. And the team is, again, like you'll know, it's a signal that Nebraska has achieved another level when it doesn't ever have to do that. When the motivation is internal. That's where the comparisons are. How did we practice last week? How did we play last week? We can do better than that this week. It's not about the opponent. And
what do you think Ohio State compares themselves to? Themselves.
Yeah. Right. And I was thinking about Alabama as I watched Alabama on Saturday night, and we'll maybe mention this in the next segment, like the college football game of the year to this point. Those teams on the field in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night, they get motivation from each other. for sure. But outside of that game, they're just comparing themselves to what they were a week ago or a year ago. They don't go around saying we're a good team. They know they're a good team. They know they're a great team. And this is where Nebraska's at. Like, I don't have an issue with Nebraska saying it. Like, I think this is where this is just the place that Nebraska is at in the growth of its program. So when they get past that, and when, like, as Rhule said in his press conference on Saturday after the game, look around at all of the young players who are contributing, and you see Barney and Raiola celebrating in the end zone, but look what they did with Carter Nelson and sending him in there to try to score from the 1 yard line, and Willis McGahee and Mario Buford and others who are in their first. Gunnar Gatula in his second year in the program. He's a freshman. All of these players are so new to this. And someday soon, Rhule said, these are going to be the guys out there. And you're not going to be thinking about them as new players. You're going to be thinking about them as the face of the Nebraska football program. I don't get the sense that those players, when they're in that position, are going to be telling people and needing to hear that they're a good team.
Maybe that goes away after they get one of these wins, against a top 20. Now Rutgers is not going to be in the top 25 this week.
Sadly, it should be. Yeah, that's a travesty.
I agree. Travesty. That's exactly the word that I was thinking too. It's a travesty.
Illinois still in the top 25. They have a loss.
But like, maybe it goes away once Nebraska, I don't know, maybe they have to punch up, maybe they have to beat
they beat Virginia Tech,
Ohio State or something like that. But I would put Rutgers kind of in the same pool as what Nebraska's in right now. So maybe that doesn't do it. I don't know. It's a curious thing, the mindset of the program and its players.
Just disrespect for Greg Schiano. I don't get it. Like 4-0, they beat Howard, they beat Akron. And then they beat Virginia Tech and Washington. Virginia Tech and Washington are legitimate victories. They were both by 3 points, but I don't care. Those are good wins. Right? I think Rutgers deserves to be ranked.
Travesty. Once again, put it on the poll quote. We're going to see some more social stuff from us coming forward. This is the first one.
You are.
Poll quote from Mitch Sherman. It's a travesty. All
right. I'm going to get that to our social media team. After the break, we are going to talk about officiating in the Big Ten and what's wrong with it, what can be done to fix it. I'm not sure we have the answers. I'm not sure we have the answers for that, but we'll discuss.
But first, it's Happer here for the FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is, of course, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. Just imagine you're sitting there on a Sunday afternoon and you're watching the games, and also you are wagering whenever you get a hunch. Do so with the FanDuel Sportsbook because it's all right there for you. And when you get started with FanDuel, you'll get started with a nice little net behind you. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. How about that for a start? That's like a touchdown and 3 plays on the first drive or a pick 6 on the first drive. That's what we're offering you with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Once again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. To get started right now, just head to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you on a Monday. We'll hear from Matt Rhule later on today and get into some Rutgers talk. We'll make sure to talk about Rutgers earlier this week than we did Purdue.
I think it comes up. What do you think? I think it comes up within 3 to 4 minutes.
It's a big game. It should have a big game feel.
We're not going to be dissecting Purdue. Like, it's time that we'll move on from Purdue, and there'll be a question about Kyle Monangai and Rutgers. Is that right?
Monangai.
Running back, goes over 100 yards every week. He's very good. Nebraska will have its hands full stopping that guy.
Yeah, led the Big
Ten.
A
lot of questions about him. That should be a pressing topic at the Monday presser with Matt Rhule.
Very good player, that's for sure. So we'll have that today in reaction, of course, tomorrow. But speaking of Purdue, they fired their offensive coordinator on Sunday afternoon. That would be former Texas Tech quarterback Graham Harrell. So there you go. Nebraska got a coach fired. You love to see it, right? Well, I don't know if we like to see people fired, but it happened.
No, but it means that things weren't going well. And in the past, that's not really been the trend after teams played Nebraska, that they would go and fire coordinators. So it's a change. That's for sure.
That's definitely a little bit different. Also, you mentioned it in the last segment. Didn't get the chance to talk much about the Alabama-Georgia game, which was an absolute spectacle of the sport. Alabama got up 28-0 in a hurry, blitzed Georgia immediately right out of the gate, and then Georgia just clawed back all the way to take the lead until 17-year-old Ryan Williams,
my God, that play.
who has eye black tape that says "kill everybody" on his nose, made one of the coolest college football plays I have ever seen, with a pirouette on the sideline to take it for a touchdown.
Humanly impossible. It was like he was some kind of a leopard or something out there. The way he moved on the sideline. I can't even explain it.
Yeah.
Two things about that play. One, my daughter texted me after that play, and she's a senior in high school, and she said, "I'm older than Ryan Williams." That was number one. He doesn't turn 18 until next year. And then number two, so we taped our reaction pod on Saturday night after I returned to downtown Chicago from West Lafayette, and I was in my hotel, and then we started taping it at halftime of the Georgia-Bama game, and I kind of tuned it out.
Yeah.
After we got done, I met up with former colleague and friend Adam Rittenberg from ESPN, who was on his way back from, big name drop for me there.
Nice.
On his way back from Notre Dame. He lives in Chicago and was on his way back from Notre Dame, the Notre Dame Louisville game. And he stopped, and we sat down at a sports bar in downtown Chicago and watched the whole fourth quarter, the whole Georgia amazing comeback, and then Alabama's comeback and the interception to win that thing. So I was standing at the bar ordering some food when Ryan Williams had that spectacular play.
That's already locked it up, number one of the year so far.
Yeah.
And we'll see if anything.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the Athletic has and Ryan Williams is not on this list. The Athletic will have its first, or it should be out today on Monday, its first Heisman watch, the Heisman straw poll. We take a poll of all college football writers and give a 1, 2, 3 on the Heisman at that moment in time. And as I was filling mine out on Sunday, I thought, well, should I put Ryan Williams on there? Because who's better than Ryan Williams? Like, look at that guy.
It's the coolest play. Like I said, it's the coolest play I've seen in a long time. And so if Milroe's already a Heisman candidate and he's involved in that play, I think he gets a bump just because of that play.
Yeah. Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. We'll see Jeremiah Smith in a few weeks, the Ohio State freshman wide receiver. Those two are just out of this world talents who in 3 years are going to be first round picks, or 2.5 years. And it's a treat to have them in college football. So Nebraska has to contend with that in late October. A guy maybe, I don't know, maybe better than Ryan Williams as an all-around receiver. Yeah. Smith was the number one recruit in the nation, the number one prospect last year in the class of 2024. So I had Travis Hunter atop my Heisman ballot at this moment, and then Milroe and Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami. That's where I'm at.
Well, both those wide receivers are freaks. There's no doubt about that. Whether they are on the Heisman list or not, they're both freaks of nature. Okay, so let's challenge ourselves here. Can we have a 2 to 3 to 4 minute civil, normal conversation about Big Ten officials before we take a break? This is the challenge that I'm proposing to us here in the short term.
Well, they weren't as controversial this week as ACC officials, so the Big Ten has that going for it. Did you see the overturned Hail Mary that was like a 6-minute review, and then they determined that Virginia Tech won the game, and then Miami won the game? That was Friday night, and not a fine moment for that league.
I did see that, but I don't know. The Big Ten's got some more. They got some more evidence to put forth. They have the botched weird onside with Michigan and Minnesota,
Oh, yeah.
and then the entire debacle, of course, between Nebraska and Purdue. I'll say this: like we use those words, and we always talk about Big Ten officiating.
Debacle.
It's never as bad as we think it is in the moment. It really isn't. And like this is a total 48 to 72 hours later take, when you're not in the heat of the game. But it's there's just going to be some things every week that are going to be here and there, and there's calls that go one way and that they go the other, and sometimes it does affect either outcomes of games or outcomes of plays. Specifically, it took a touchdown off the board for Nebraska on Saturday, at least once. So I don't know, man. Like everybody kind of has this stuff, and especially everybody in the Big Ten has it. I just like during the game, fire me up. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how bad they are. And then during the week, I'm just like, yeah, you can't really account for any of it. What are we supposed to do? Prepare for it now? Like, I don't know.
As long as everyone's getting the short end of the stick, then you're just okay
Sure.
with the mismanaged officiating. I think the Big Ten should do something. I really do. I just don't think that the quality of officiating, especially maybe when you get beyond like the top crew in the league, is very good. I don't know if they need to pay them more. I don't know if they need to train them better. I don't know if Tony Petitti, the commissioner, needs to make it a priority to address this. Like, obviously, like it's just like umpires in baseball or officials in basketball, like they're not truly accountable. And I don't know in what way you make them accountable. It's not like you're going to go releasing the reports and the names of everyone, but
right.
It seems to just be every week. And it was Big 12 officials a couple of weeks ago for Nebraska against in the Colorado game. The Illinois game had some questionable stuff. And I'm not even saying that they're determining outcomes of games. You might argue that, and certainly the Virginia Tech might say that, and Minnesota might say that. It's eventually going to come down to it. And if you have a play like that Fedoni OPI that determines the outcome of a game, it's, there's the travesty. The travesty, I forgot. What was the travesty in the last segment? Oh, yes, Rutgers not being ranked.
Yeah. Travesty.
There's the travesty. Thomas Fedoni, Ramir Johnson not getting credited for a touchdown and Nebraska not going up 7-0 in the first half. That's the travesty, because that call, there's bad calls, and then there are bad calls. Remember how John Hull has a big leg? Yeah. So that was
too many bigs, coach. Too many bigs.
That was a bad call. And when we talked about it the first time, I had not gone back and watched it like over and over and over and over, like I did later Saturday night and into Sunday. But I mean, Fedoni's right. He didn't even touch him. He tried to get out of the way. Rhule freaked out on the sideline there, and he didn't get flagged that time, but he did later on. So I don't know what the answer is, but it seems for too long like the answer has been nothing, and I think the answer should be something.
Yeah, people always throw out those ideas of like you mentioned it. How do you hold them more accountable? Well, I don't know, make them do press conferences and stuff. That wouldn't help. That would only hurt. That would make everything worse. Like all of these things, whether you take them out of their anonymity or like whatever it is, or there needs to be more defined standards on how guys get into what game or whatever it might be. Like it just. It's weird because I feel like the more transparent you make this situation and from a league perspective, the worse the narratives get. And then, like I said, you start like in the NBA, it's constantly a talking point. We know all the bad officials' names in the NBA because they call them out by number, and they have this Twitter account that has the last 2-minute report and all this different thing. Like it has made that situation so ugly and like it's not a desirable conversation to have. So I don't know what you do. I don't want it to turn into that. That's for sure.
I don't like it when the league just pretends like that there's nothing going on, and I kind of feel like that's what they're doing.
That's fair too.
I don't have a solution, and I agree with you that I'm not in tune with what is happening in the NBA with officiating, but what you described does not sound appetizing.
everybody knows Scott Foster. Everybody knows that the guy. There's one guy who they call the extender because he doesn't do sweeps. So if he's doing game 4 of a series and it's about to be a sweep, you get that official in there. Like that's like They have names for all these people. So I don't know. It's just stupid. It's all stupid conversations. But
the only one I know is Tim Donaghy. And
that was a bad one. Yeah, that was a bad one. Something needed to be done about that one, and something was.
He was the one betting on games.
Yeah.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk more college football, big picture, and where Nebraska fits into it. That is coming up next. Stay with us. Okay, Mitch Sherman here to talk about Game Time because it's college football season and you want tickets to college football games. Also, it's the postseason in baseball. It is here. Well, today you have a couple of final games and then the wild card games begin and then the Kansas City Royals are going to Baltimore. I can tell you, if it wasn't the middle of the college football season, I didn't have obligations at home, I would be looking at plane tickets to go to Baltimore and go to Camden Yards. And if I did it, I would be looking at Game Time to find me seats in that stadium. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the app go down the closer you get to first pitch or the kickoff or whatever it is. So wherever you want to go this fall, maybe it's a college football game, maybe it's a baseball game, maybe there's a basketball game coming up that you want to see. Maybe it's Nebraska volleyball, which swept USC and beat UCLA this weekend. They're a hot ticket. Go check it out on Game Time. I love that you can see flash deals, views from your seat. You can customize your spot in the stadium. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, we're back for segment number 3 on this Monday. Mitch Sherman here with Connor Happer to finish up our it's actually our second episode of the week of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. All right, feel free to jump in here. I have this theory, Connor, that I shared on Twitter on Sunday. The first part's not really a theory. It's just a fact. And the fact is that Nebraska fans and media who cover the team are just conditioned to believe that bad things are going to happen to Nebraska when it plays in a close game. So on Saturday, there was a lot of gloom around the conversation involving the game early. I was guilty of tweeting in the first half that, quote, this has all the makings of an awful game for Nebraska that causes it to leave here with a lot of regrets and a season steered in the wrong direction. Okay, maybe that was a little dramatic.
Nice. Way to call out yourself. I appreciate that. Thank you for the transparency.
But don't you just feel that way when you're watching the games? And I think that the Nebraska fans feel that way. Like you're just waiting.
I actually didn't feel like Nebraska was going to lose that game. I never really felt that Nebraska was in too much real danger of actually losing that game. I know they were
for you.
I know.
Mature.
Well, maybe I'm just blind. I have no idea, or maybe I haven't been watching the games for the last my entire life. But they were moving the ball, and they would get into these third down situations, and it would just the wheels would fall off for them. And I knew that we knew that field goal kicking wasn't going to be a thing for them. Yeah. But I just felt like, all right, they got the quarterback, like they're just better than the other team. I don't feel like they're going to lose this game. Nebraska's been worse than teams they've lost, are better than teams they've lost to before. That's certainly happened. But I didn't have that doom feeling really on Saturday.
I was definitely having flashbacks to games at Purdue that were just almost impossible to explain how Nebraska lost. Yeah. I looked back at some of the stories that I wrote from previous trips to Purdue. So in Scott Frost's second year, Nebraska went to Purdue and lost to Aiden O'Connell and Rondale Moore and David Bell, George Karloftis, like some really good players for Purdue. And I ripped Nebraska for like making a name out of this fourth string walk-on quarterback named Aiden O'Connell, who like his name was spelled wrong on the Purdue website. He was nobody. That was his coming out party. And I'm like, I didn't say this, but I basically said it. This guy's never going to amount to anything. Whoops. Yeah. He's been an NFL starter. So he was pretty good. I don't think this Purdue team has that, and I still I felt like we were seeing visions of the past. So my theory is this.
Sorry, yeah, keep going. Explain this.
Yeah, there's only a couple teams. There's a few teams in college football for whom it is a huge disappointment to play a competitive game against a conference opponent. Like if you're stuck in a competitive game against run-of-the-mill team from your conference, that's hugely disappointing. There's only a few teams in the sport who will say that. Ohio State and Michigan at Michigan last year, Michigan the last 3 years are not this year, are among those teams. Alabama, Georgia. I think Texas is in that category right now. But the Longhorns found themselves on Saturday in a close game for the whole first half and much of the third quarter against hapless Mississippi State. So everybody else beyond that top group is flawed. They just have issues. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not. We show up every week and we find out. And Nebraska's in that category. So just because it didn't trounce Purdue in the first half of that game, because it didn't close out Illinois, they can still improve. Like Nebraska's in this category of teams that are good teams. And that's the beauty right now. Like we've been like, it's been such a toxic environment at Nebraska that I think we lost sight of the fact that like Nebraska is, we were talked about this in the first segment. Like now tell us, Nebraska is a good team. Nebraska can get better as the year goes on. If there's something that you saw in the first half of that game that you just think is untenable, is unmanageable, like you can't live with that, well, like they can improve it. They can improve that over the next 7 games. And I think they will.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were explaining that, like Iowa has built their entire, empire off of this idea, right? We know that we're not better than anybody. We know that we're not that much better than anybody or that much worse than anybody either, with the exception of those teams that you mentioned. We're in this pool with everybody else. So what we're going to do is never mess up. We're never going to mess up. We're never going to turn the ball over. If we have to punt, we'll punt. We'll have the best punter in the world. If we have to kick a field goal, we'll have the best field goal kicker in the world, and we'll have the best defense in the world. And we'll just never mess up. And guess what?
Such a great analogy.
The Big Ten West every year.
Yeah. Well, no more. There is no Big Ten West. Right. Iowa loves a good 0-0 game at halftime.
Yeah.
Like, give us 0-0 at halftime. We got you. Like how Rhule said that this is right where Nebraska wanted to be. I don't think he really believes that. I think he believes that's what the team needed to hear, but he wanted to be up 14-0. He wanted to be up 21-7. Of course he did. Iowa loves to have a 0-0 game at halftime
because he knows that if they're not up 17-7 or whatever it should have been. I mean, Nebraska, there was probably a world where Nebraska could have been up 3 touchdowns at halftime. He knows that if they don't take advantage, then they're, when they get closer and closer later and later, then it's anybody's game. But he's trying to change the DNA here. He's trying to say, all right, fine. We'll drag them into the mud just like Iowa does. Let's drag them into the mud with us. Let's make this thing as ugly as we possibly can. And then just say at the end of the day, okay, it's one drive. Cool. We have the best quarterback in the country, or whatever you think Dylan Raiola might be. Like I think that's what he's trying to get people's minds to change on. So that's why he said a million times over on Saturday afternoon, that was the perfect game for us, because it was in the third quarter and Nebraska was like, it was up in the air. There was a question as to whether they were going to win that game.
I'm going to carry over into the rest of the season, remembering that this is a flawed team. That's just how they are. And there's a lot of other teams out there like Nebraska. So you're in good company. I'm looking at the AP top 25 here, and like the whole bottom 4 out of 5 rows are filled with teams just like that every week you might see something from one or all or any of those teams that makes you just shake your head and go, how do they even like get through the day?
Yep. And that's when it comes down to accentuating what you're good at and trying to minimize what you're bad at, or hiding what you're bad at. Okay. Yeah. This is like a relatively deep episode. We've had some thoughtful conversations today. Appreciate you doing this.
I hope you all appreciated that.
Yeah, think about it a little bit. All right. We'll be back with you on Tuesday. We'll recap what Matt Rhule has to say and plenty more, and look ahead to Rutgers, of course, because they are in the middle of a travesty. Remember that. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. They'll get you covered all the way up to date. You can find the link to the Locked On College Football Podcast in the description to this podcast. You don't even need to search. That's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.